Welcome and Happy New Year, everybody. It's a pleasure to see everybody after the break and to usher in 2024. My name is Reid Shire. I'm the director of the Polygon Gallery, and it is a pleasure to gather here in January and to celebrate the exhibition that's been on for the last couple of months. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathering tonight on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people. And I'm grateful particularly to the members of the Squamish Nation, on whose ancestral lands near the village of Aslahan the gallery is situated, and for the opportunity to welcome you all here tonight. I'm also very grateful to welcome Dieter Roelstraete and Ron Terada for a conversation that will center on TLDR, the work that is on exhibition next door, an epic cycle of paintings by Ron, and one of three major artworks that compose and comprise from Slander's brand. I believe it will also touch on Ron's larger practice. And before introducing them, I'd just like to thank a few people who have helped us realize this exceedingly ambitious exhibition. Lisa and Terry Turner, Diana and Mark Soares, and Bruno Wall, each of whom have generously contributed to making the show possible, and I'm really grateful for their support. I'd also like to thank Shayo Olowe Ake for her help organizing tonight's talk and for her help in coordinating all of our public programs. So, Shayo, thank you. Dieter Roelstraete is curator of the Neubauer Collegium at the University of Chicago, where he has organized exhibitions by Gelatin, Pope L, Martha Rosler, Slavs and Tatters, as well as many others. And forthcoming next month, a project with Christopher Williams, which I am particularly excited to see. Roelstraete worked as curator for 2017's Documenta 14 in Castle in Athens, and from 2012 until 2015, he served as the Manilow Senior Curator at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago. From 2003 to 2011, Roelstraete was a curator at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Antwerp, in his native Belgium. And it was at MUCA, the acronym, in 2005 that he co-curated Intertidal with Scott Watson, one of the most ambitious international surveys of Vancouver contemporary practice. I think to date at that point, perhaps to date till now, and where a long-standing relationship with Vancouver and its artists, including Ron Terada, began, and where I first met him as well. So I'm grateful to welcome Dieter here tonight. And since graduating from Emily Carr in 1991, Ron Terada has developed a wide-ranging art practice that, while centered on painting, has grown to include photography, video, music, as well as publications, posters, billboards, and signage, among many other mediums. And I've had the privilege of working with Ron on a number of solo and group exhibitions, including one of my first as director-curator of the Or Gallery in 1997, Gray Paintings, as well as Catalog in 2003 during my tenure as curator of the Contemporary Art Gallery. Ron's practice challenges what it means to make an exhibition. And as an artist, he continually tests the relationship of an artwork to the context of its public display. And certainly, some of my proudest work as a curator has come out of and in conversation with Ron, including the current exhibition from Slander's brand, which was in part, and a significant part, precipitated by the immense act of labor that it took Ron to make the 325 paintings that it includes. And I am very grateful to hear him and Dieter speak about it tonight. So please join me in welcoming Dieter Roelstraete and Ron Terada.
Good evening.
Hello.
You.
Hello. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And thanks, Reed, for inviting me to come speak here in what is, of course, a very meaningful occasion, once again for me, in Vancouver. And I'm going to talk to Ron about the exhibition that's just next door, which is one of the reasons why we don't have any images of that work here on view. But when asked by the Polygon Gallery if there was anything I wanted to show, I did propose a number of images, and I just want to show those very briefly, just to kind of frame a little bit the history of my engagement with Ron's work and Vancouver more generally. And I want to thank, so I wanted to thank Reed. I of course want to thank Ron as well, and I want to thank Monika Shevchik as well. And I got the bag of popcorn here because there may be a corny moment every now and then in the proceedings. As I was getting on the plane, it all of a sudden dawned upon me that it's almost been 20 years to the day that I first set foot in Terminal City. I first came here in April 2004.
Really? I thought it was, 2004. That's right.
So I've known you for 20 years, which is almost...
Yeah, don't say that.
It's almost a quarter of your life. It's
okay, sure.
In half of mine.
Let's go with that. Sure.
And just to kind of briefly frame that history, so this is can I call this an early work, or is this already mid-career Ron Terada?
This is an early work. It's like 2002, so...
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, not juvenile, yeah.
What, yeah.
Not a youthful, yes. Anyway, this is a work of Ron's that I remember seeing early on and being completely enchanted about it. And this is, of course, an image of that work exhibited at Catriona Jeffries' gallery on Granville Street in 2002, 2003. Is that correct, Catriona? Do I get the dates right? 2004, the year of my arrival here, and this is a photograph of Ron's, which we used to grace the cover of the publication that was published, that was made on the occasion of the exhibition that Reed referred to, that I co-curated with Scott Watson at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Antwerp. Intertitle, Vancouver Art and Artists, which Ron then actually kind of appropriated as an element in a work produced at a later date. So, we have a history of, we have like a 20-year history to look back up on here, really.
Yeah, but, there's a big gap, right?
There is a gap.
Yeah.
There is a gap of my
20 years
complete indifference and absence.
That's right.
Yes.
But cold, man, cold.
Cold. But I was here actually 2 years ago. I came back to Vancouver for the first time in a long while to see Stephen Shearer exhibition here also at the Polygon Gallery. And he's another artist who I first met on that incredibly important trip in 2004. And it's quite, like coming to Vancouver for me as a Belgian curator working Antwerp at the time was a completely revelatory experience. And of course, the early days also of my curating life, my curating career, and I made some professional relationships, but also friendships that have proven to be quite very sturdy and transformative in their way. And Ron and Stephen Shearer and Stan Douglas and lots of Judy Radul, lots of artists in the city have continued to be interlocutors, and I am grateful, of course, for the opportunity extended to me about a year ago, courtesy of the power plant, to finally write about Ron's work in depth, which led to an article, an essay, which will appear in a monograph to be published shortly, I believe.
At some point in the year, I guess.
At some point in the year.
Yeah.
The year's young.
Yes, the year's young. So let's say fall, maybe?
Might it be in time for your birthday?
No.
Because that's the day after tomorrow, right?
Okay, yeah.
Can everyone
anyhow,
just, let's hear a hand for Ron later?
He's just here to make me squirm. That's what they flew him in for.
We'll get to the art soon enough,
man.
Ron. We'll get to the art.
Yeah.
Does us talking over each other impede the recording? I hope it doesn't. Anyway, those were the only images really wanted to show.
It's odd, but anyhow, yeah.
Anyway, when I did visit Vancouver 2 years ago, it was a very, very brief trip in February, and we reconnected. I came to your studio, and this was the moment that I'm not sure where you were exactly in the realization of this particular work, but that was what you were working on at the time. So I already got like a very first embryonic taste of it 2 years ago. It then became an exhibition in Toronto. It became an exhibition in Basel briefly, and it is now an exhibition here. TLDR, too long, did not read. And that is what we're going to talk about today.
Hopefully it won't be too long, though. But yeah, sure.
Oh,
yeah.
Hopefully it won't be too long.
Yeah, but
it didn't. Too long. Did register.
Yeah, didn't register. Exactly.
So everyone here has, of course, seen the work. It's next door. So I assume, of course, that we're all kind of talking about it from a position of some familiarity. And Ron, I will just ask you to begin by talking a little bit about the genesis of the project. When did it start? Where did it came from? Why did you do it? All that.
Well, okay. For starters, this iteration of the work that you see in the gallery, it's the final sort of segment of this body of work, which I started probably making in 2017. Well, actually, I started compiling headlines in 2016, right? But in 2016, it was very casual. It was very there was nothing strategic about it. I just had come across this website called The Verge, which is where all these headlines are taken from. And just through visiting it over time, I just decided to start clipping and keeping an archive or a compilation of headlines. And then at some point, near the end of 2016, I thought, well, maybe there was a possibility that this could be some kind of work. So. But in this instance, the work that's next door, it's like, yeah, I made this over the last 2 years, pretty much during, I guess, the COVID years, let's say. Yeah. But in 2019, I kind of wanted to stop making TLDR. I thought, like, the work has gone far enough in terms of sort of documenting the sort of absurdity of the tech world. But then 2020 happened, and then everything shut down, and I just felt that this year could turn into something quite different. And so after, a brief, I guess, shutdown or closure of our studios, I returned to work back in May of 2020, and I started the headlines for 2020.
It is a chronicle of 2020. Yep. Which you continued to work on well into 2022, 23 even?
No, 22, I wrapped it up.
22,
yeah,
22. At some point it was over and done with.
Yes, thankfully.
Yes, thankfully, yes, exactly. We'll come back to that.
Yeah, I know you want.
It can't possibly have been pleasant to make for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
Yeah. Baby steps.
Yes. When we had a conversation prior to my writing the essay about this particular work, you kind of filled in the context a little bit also for my, to better my understanding, and what's different. This is the largest work that you have made to date, I would say, if you consider it to be one piece. Am I correct?
Sure. I mean, again, this particular body of work is broken up into 5 segments. Mm-hmm. So if you just look at the 5 segments, they amount to maybe 470 odd paintings.
Right.
But for this final segment, it actually consists of 325. So you can tell I kind of went all out.
Yes,
in
that's
the
massive.
Final. Yeah.
That's massive.
Yeah.
You may not make anything of that size ever again in your life.
I don't think I want to, no.
Right, yes, yeah.
But you never know.
So,
never say no, never,
So it is it does signal a very strong break in your work with what came before.
Well,
to a certain extent, perhaps not.
Okay,
What would be the break?
I wouldn't say so much of a break other than maybe in terms of maybe subject matter. Because previous work has always been sort of, I wouldn't say obsessed, but my interest was in like exhibition making and, you know, the context of the art world. And so by the time I started this body called Jack, which was where I retranscribed the biography of Jack Goldstein onto, I forget how many canvases it ended up being, but it was quite large too, but I think it's under 100 canvases, okay? I felt that after completing that body of work, I just thought like I didn't need to make work that addressed the inner workings of the art world anymore. It just felt like I've kind of exhausted that. And so for some reason, I just started thinking about tech. Right. And it just led me to this work. So, but again, I don't want that to come across as, you know, overly calculated, or there's a lot of bumbling in the dark when I move from one body of work to the next. But but for lack of a better word, I just didn't want to deal with the art world anymore, or work that dealt with it.
Right.
Yeah.
You had it with art about art.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yes.
It felt like I could make work about the world now, and so tech seemed like this kind of thing that we all had sort of. You know, we all interface with tech now, so it's unavoidable. And I just thought that's a great kind of a lowest common denominator sort of entry point into making work.
Right.
Yeah.
It's perhaps an epiphany of middle age.
Okay, sure. If you want to bring up age, sure. Yeah, you can.
I am an ageist.
I'm picking up on that.
Yes. So the Jack series of paintings took years to produce.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, that body of work was my sort of return to painting, because I stopped painting for 10 years, actually. Yeah. So, but I got lured back into making paintings by Kitty Scott.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
She had presented this.
She paid you?
Well, no, kind of, yes, kind of. She, at the time, this is back in 2009, she was working at the Banff Center. And she had proposed that I come take part of a painting residency in 2009, in the summer. And I said, well, I'm not painting, Kitty. What would I do there? And also, I had no interest in really taking part in a residency. Also, the fact that you had to, like, pay to be there, I just thought, like, well, I don't want to do that. I just stay home, right? So, but then she said, well, no, I'm going to set you up with a fellowship. And, you know, I just hung up the phone. I said, whatever. I just, you know. But then a month later, and she calls me and said, I got you a fellowship. You have to attend now. So, and when something like that happens, I had to take it seriously. And so it just led me into thinking about, you know, returning to painting. And it made me think of Jack Goldstein for some reason. Right? Because he made all these terrific short films. And then suddenly in the 80s, he decided he had to be a painter to sort of keep up as an artist. So it kind of, I just used that, his trajectory, as a means to sort of re-entering the you know, possibility of making paintings again. So.
You know, I did know that, and now I feel I should have put that in the essay. Stop press.
You could still rewrite the whole thing if you want. I'm not going to stop you.
So they are paintings.
Yes.
They may not look like them.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing with my work. It never really, like at first glance, you have to kind of go, oh, no, someone actually made this.
Right.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about the you know, the routine in a way, the particulars of producing, like, you know, how did you go about this? I mean, it must have been, you know, it's the work of an obsessive mind in a way.
No.
Well, I'm not pathologizing the gesture.
No, yeah, I'm
not
offended. Like,
it's very kind of, you know, very single focused. It's very monastic, you know, the execution of the work. But, you know, tell us a little bit about the decisions that informed the different dimensions, the font, black on white. I mean, there's a lot of things happening. It's text, but of course, it's also a giant immersive history painting. And I want to hear a little bit about technique and formal considerations.
Okay, first, you want to talk about like just the basic general how the work gets made, like technically.
That would be
okay.
That's
well, there's not really too much to it. I've always made paintings in a particular fashion, and usually that just entails selecting a typeface. Once I've determined what the content or subject matter of the work's going to be, and then it's just a matter of replicating it, doing it over and over, kind of thing. So in this sense, for TLDR, for example, I didn't like the typeface that I found the original headlines in. It was like some sans serif font that didn't signify news for me or proper journalism. So I looked to something like the New York Times. And so once I discovered, that typeface is Cheltenham, that's what I'm going to use to make these headlines. And then it's just a matter of then retypesetting all the headlines with a graphic designer friend, and then we just cut it as a stencil, and I just use it as a stencil, and that becomes the way the paintings get made. So it's actually very straightforward, and it's a way of making paintings that hasn't changed since I started painting in the 90s.
But 325 paintings, that's that's a gargantuan effort. So there's a lot of, the work also kind of speaks a bit to the the labor involved in producing art.
I think COVID had a lot to do with it, right? I mean, and it's like the work also speaks to COVID, but it's also like the situation of being in COVID enabled me to, pursue this work or this amount of paintings. Right. Like, COVID was bad for some people. It was actually really great for me because it just enabled me to work. There's nothing you can do anyways. You couldn't see anybody, right?
Don't you just miss it?
Kind of. So I already had a windowless studio anyway. So, but now I had no social obligations any longer. So it was like I can,
Yes.
subject myself to this kind of labor.
Right. Yeah.
So I loved it.
There you hear it, the glamorous life of an artist.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, finally.
Delivered
of social obligations.
Yeah.
No holding mics in front of,
Yeah, exactly. You feel me now. That's good.
And there, of course, it's also a compositional tour de force. Which is a function of the fact that they're differently scaled. Some of the canvases are differently scaled, and of course this is something that I remarked upon in the essay. The biggest canvases are given over to the most inane news items that really aren't news items at all. The smallest canvases, there's no hard and fast rules there, but it seems to be a little bit the logic, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like say when. Say a band is like trying to put together an album, a sequence of songs for an album. You don't want the hook to be the single to be right at the front. Like you need it, so you got to build up to it, right? And so it just happened that I decided to pick the dumber the headline, the bigger it should be, as a way of luring the viewer into the work. Because the smaller ones are a bit more severe, right? Because they deal with COVID, the body count of COVID. Well, but I wanted that news to be there, throughout the work. But I didn't want it to be forefront. Mm-hmm. I wanted the dumb pop song in the forefront. So, yeah.
So now about feelings.
Feelings.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let me just read.
Yeah, go for it.
The opening.
You're going to rewrite that text anyways.
I'm just going to read it. Right. So this is how it started. It is part and parcel of the fabric of art that it is riddled with innumerable irresolvable questions, their irresolvability being the very essence, indeed, of what it means to think about art. The set of questions I am pondering today are the following. Is art's reason for being to please or to displease, to make us feel good or bad? And I go on to say, I am thinking about this today because I am looking at Ron Terada's Too Long Did Not Read, a chronicle of one of the worst years of our lives as seen through the especially deplorable prism of tech culture. And as you walk in to the room here, you know, amazing, beautiful installation with Rachel Kadori's work in the middle of it, you know, shown in a way that kind of conjures memories of On Kawara's book pieces. And of course, I talk, you know, entitling the essay On Terada as an homage to the great Japanese-American conceptualist. But you walk into the room, and it is, of course, an incredibly, I mean, it's a stark reminder of how incredibly miserable that period was. Even though, of course, there were certain benefits to the experience of the COVID pandemic. We all know that. But it was, I mean, when I wrote this essay, it felt like 2020 surely was the worst year in recent memory for most of us to go through. This was the case until 2023 happened, which now everybody agrees is probably the worst year on record in recent human memory. And so I was struck by the fact that you would spend 2 years, a year and a half or longer, and 325 paintings looking up so oppressively close at this awfulness. And I know. I see you. I read your body language, but you know. So I'm curious. Like, how did making the work? How did it make you feel? No, it's a serious question.
Really
like, what's the what is the?
We're really going for feelings here.
Oh man.
I know.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm emotional. I mean, I didn't know that even North Vancouver would do it to me, but So yes, I'm kind of interested in the emotional content or in the emotional dimension of making this work, and I understand, of course, that it's, you know, like art's historical sense of obligation or art's sense of obligation to the historical record has often been one of recording horrors. You know, if you think of Eugène Delacroix, Caravaggio, whatever, you know, so you know, art history is half of art history is a horror show, and this is obviously in there.
Sure, I mean, not like how many happy artworks can you think of, really, though? Like, you know, like. True. But anyhow, as far as my relationship with the subject matter, the headlines, you know, like, I mean, a lot of it was more you get over it when you're compiling these headlines, right? Once everything is determined, like in terms of what the paintings are going to look like, what size they're going to be, what color they're going to be, it's the making of it is just kind of matter of fact. Like, you just have to sort of see it through. I stupidly went for 325 paintings when maybe I probably didn't have to do that, but at the time when I started, I thought it didn't seem like COVID might never end. I mean, it really hasn't ended, by the way, but so. You know, like, so a lot of the sort of your initial reactions or feelings about the headlines, it's already in the rearview mirror.
Right.
Because I dealt with it when I first was reading the headlines online, and then, or if I read certain articles, then it was kind of over, right? And then it was just like, oh, I'm in this process, I just have to execute. I just have to see this thing through, because this year is going to be a gong show, and it ended up becoming a bigger gong show month after month, right?
Yes.
Like, all the stuff that happened in 2020, you couldn't predict it, even beyond COVID, right?
Yeah. Well, 2020 is kind of the year that satire died, right? I mean, how can you satirize?
This is what you write about, but you're going to write a new text.
I do write about that.
Yeah,
I'm just making sure that people, you know, get a hold of the catalog, right? Like, what else did he write?
I know.
It is a 20,000-word monster essay with, 10,000 words of which are in the footnotes alone, right?
I know. You're plugging the text. I get it.
Plugging the text, you know. But wait a minute. That's a power plant publication. What am I doing? Just spreading the love? But anyway, so there's a cathartic. So there's something therapeutic. I mean, I know that you might dislike the language, but there's maybe something therapeutic about the way that you exercise the demons of that moment.
Again, you're kind of buttering it up. Maybe it's the popcorn. Like, there's no exercising or anything. It's just like, as an artist, it's just work. Like, this is what you do. Mm-hmm. And just like, it's just like when you do a 20,000 word text. It's just work, dog. Like, you know. So I wouldn't invest it so much or so heavily as like
feelings.
Feelings. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But hey, that's just me. Right?
Somebody needs to. Well, no. Who needs a couch, right? When you have an audience.
Okay, sure.
But so this afternoon, I went to see. I went to see some of the work that you've made after this work at Catriona Jeffries Gallery. The black paintings that were exhibited in Vancouver in the fall, just recently, and I imagine many of you have seen them. Hopefully, and the title of that exhibition was Barbecue, Beer, Freedom. Yeah, which of course we can all. That's a war cry that we can all agree on.
It's pretty happy for me, yeah.
But I looked at some of the paintings that they're likewise word paintings that, and perhaps you can kind of share some of the phrases, but like you really went. The work here is of course, there's lots of humor and there's lots of irreverence, and some of the formulations and some of the headlines have the absurd tang of concrete poetry, right? It's the kind of formulations that we know in 10 years' time will not mean anything at all anymore. So there's comic relief in this work. Right. But it's felt like seeing the work you made after, the black paintings, which I think you continue to do today, which also make use of, heavily charged political language, picked specifically from the American right. This continues to be the world that your head is in, which is a dark place. And so... What do you do for laughs? No, that's not what I meant. But there's darker than this.
Well, but I think when you go through this work, this particular year of TLDR, I mean, the darkness is already kind of incubating, right? Or it's hatching, or however you want to define it. It's like a bad Aliens movie, right? Like everything's hatching, right? But so. To me, to arrive at this, this more recent work, it wasn't like a huge step. It would just seem like, oh, well, this is what I'm going to do because this is the climate that we're in right now, right? It's a very divisive moment, right? And at the same time, it's like, yeah, it's dark, but it's like, at the same time, I want to reveal the absurdity of that darkness, right? Or that sort of negative sentiment, right?
Yes.
Like, in some ways, like, how do we get to a point where you take this kind of language or thinking that seriously, right? Mm-hmm. And I do admit the text some of it is pretty testy. Yeah. But you can't go halfway when you do work like that, right? Yeah. Like, for me, like maybe this isn't fair to say, but like I kind of look at like a comparison piece by like, say, maybe like, well, why am I blanking out now? Philip Guston, when he painted like the Ku Klux Klan, right? It's like, yeah, I mean, these aren't joyous paintings, but someone had to show what hate looks like in the world, right? So I felt like this was kind of operating in a similar territory, right? But of course, like, yes, I do want people to be upset because you should be upset by it. Yeah. That's kind of the point. Yeah. But at the same time, I want you to realize that, okay, maybe another way of dealing with this kind of thinking or or sentiment is to kind of also laugh at it because it's so absurd.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, but the paintings are dark. I'll give you that. You know.
They're dark, both literally and
literally, but
metaphorically.
also meant by the content,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine some of that
some
stuff
of the,
in
some of the
paint.
texts are like, you know, do you want me to say something like "no more bullshit," "fuck your feelings," like, you know.
Oh, that's why you got that. Fuck your feelings. That's why you're.
No. But I mean, but that's sort of.
Catriona,
you know,
is that one around still? Fuck your feelings. I like that. Okay.
Yeah, you know, or. You know, Jesus guns babies. Like,
Yes. Ooh.
Like, how could
rough.
you not laugh at that in some ways, right?
Well, if you live in the U.S. of A,
I know,
as
but-
I do.
I know. This, you know, maybe you could speak more to it as, someone,
Yeah.
as a European living in the States. But, but from, you know, being in Canada, I just go like, this is crazy.
Yeah, it is. But I like what you just said. Very brief, you know, in passing, it's important to show what hate looked like in 2023, 24 now. And to the, you know, by extension, one could say that the point of this work, in part, may also be it is important to kind of show, you know, the not the insanity, but just kind of like the complete, the delusions in a way of our culture.
You know, like, when I say, you know, this kind of sentiment was hatching, it's like, I think COVID is something that sort of helped spur it on, because, like, you know, we're social creatures, so, like, if you cannot socialize, like, you spend too much time in your own head and something goes awry for some people, right? Again, great time for me. But for others, it was like, you know, and then it just manifests itself by, like, you know, what was your great line in the text where they march up to the shining tower or whatever it is, like the Capitol?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Well, like, so...
What was my great line? Which great line? There's so many here.
Yeah.
But
Okay, yeah, we don't have time for this, Dieter.
yeah, but wait. One thing though. Oh, I do. One thing I should say I like, and I of course am thankful for Ron to kind of bringing it out in me. But I did coin the phrase for the experience of that particular work and described it as doom strolling.
Yes, that's good.
Everyone
I
take
do
note.
like that.
Please, copyright. So there is time. There will be time for questions from the audience. Not yet.
At the
I
rate
want
you're
to talk.
going at, maybe
Yeah,
not,
let's
no.
talk. But I have, you know. So about the feelings, though. No. Now I have two more things that I want to ask, and one of them has to do with the timeliness and time, like, you know, the tension between absolute topicality and timelessness, etc. And you know, this work being composed of headlines that are, you know, already relics from this insane transformative year, which we will all look back upon as, you know, like a hinge, right? Like, you know, on the order of 1848, 1917, what have you, 1989, 2020 for sure. It's in there. But, you know, having, with your source being a fairly niche tech culture publication, a lot of the headlines, of course, deal with information that inherently ages incredibly fast, right? I mean, you know, planned obsolescence being planned in the industry basically kind of bleeds over into the discourse. And so a question I have is, you know, this is a work that in 20 years, 10 years, maybe less, maybe 50 years, maybe it'll take 100 years, but will be half incomprehensible in a way to a large number of people. I mean, maybe everything will be completely incomprehensible in 100 years.
Sure.
You know, I'll ask my son, you know, he's 6 years old and will live to be 106, and we'll ask. But, so I'm curious about how you thought about, you know, like an idea of timelessness in this time capsule, right, which you built.
Sure. I mean,
You know what I? You know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
well, we can talk about it.
Yeah.
We can talk about anything. Well, like, time capsule, I mean, I think it could serve as a time cap, but like, what you're talking about is memory, right? Or this aspect of forgetting. I mean, I think that we live in an age of forgetting now, like, because there's no reason for us to retain anything anymore, right? Because you can just say, Alexa this, Siri, what happened this, like, there's no reason to anymore. And so even though I think we won't have the capacity to remember every sort of inane moment in this work, I still think you can still dredge it all up very instantaneously through our devices. Yeah. So I'm not really that sort of distraught by it, you know?
Yeah. I'm thinking about what I just said, that, maybe this is the quintessential 2020 artwork. But anyway, that's, yeah.
Oh, well, we can go with that, sure.
Yeah. That was a short answer for a long question, but it's okay.
Really?
Water off a duck's back.
What else do you want me to say?
No, I just realized probably my formulation wasn't, spot on, Maybe Ron is not a man of many words, but he is, because clearly it's all he ever paints, words. And now we're going to go, that's the last question. Like, I got it. That's a good, segue, right? So, yeah, like Ron is a man of many words. He just doesn't use them in person. No, I'm joking. You're the artist.
Let's go with that. Yeah.
I'm just I know. I'm just a pontificator.
You're just busting me now. Yeah.
I'm just, I'm just a pontificator, art theory. But yes, before coming here, so I had, I prepared a little bit.
I know.
To dispel any impression that we just gonna wing it. Anyway, we didn't.
No, I know we're not winging it.
No, we went overall.
I'm winging it, but you're not winging it. Yeah.
So here it is, question number 7. Why, as an artist, are you so fond of letters, words, writing? What about the image, the picture, the basic premise of what we think of as visual art? Of course, they're images. You make images. But you paint words, and you've done so for a long time. Mm-hmm. And language is your material. I was struck by it because, of course, this show, the entire exhibition, that room is extremely loquacious in a way, right? It's like very chatty.
It's very chatty.
very, very, So, yeah.
But
words, they do seem to come easy. They do seem to come easy.
Well, I think it's just more of an approach to making work that I've always preferred, let's say, right? And part of it might have to do with your own sort of personal failures, like technically as someone that makes something, right? Like, I knew I could never make figurative paintings. So there's nothing worse than seeing someone trying to make a figurative painting and they know they're bad at it, but they just keep doing it anyways. So, but I know but if you choose text as your basis for making work, then it's like, well, how can you screw that up, right? Like, it's impossible. Like, you pick your typeface. It's, whether it's a sans serif typeface or whatever, and like, you're good to go. But it also has to do with my own sort of sensibility as well. Like, I like something that's very graphic right away, or whatever the work is about, it communicates it right away. I'm not interested in something sort of subtle or mysterious. I'm kind of into this kind of more bluntness or matter-of-factness in artwork. So, and this is why, I like works like, whether it's Encore, Ed Ruscha, or however, right? So yeah. It's just a certain approach to making work and a certain sort of, I guess, belief in how I want my work to function, right? Amongst a plethora of options that artists have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good...
Is that okay? Yeah?
Yeah, that's a good answer.
Right.
For me.
Okay. If you've got question number 8, that's okay too, right?
No, do you have a question for me? But that's not the point, I think, no? Because otherwise we...
Well, then we'll be here all night, yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, yes,
No,
because
I'm just
my
kidding,
answers are famously, yeah. Anyway, but ladies and gentlemen, Ron Terada. Are we going to ask people
Yeah, if there's any questions,
interject?
then for sure. But I'm happy to answer any question too. So.
I got to think about some things that you just said, not as quick as I used to be.
Thank you, Ron and Dieter. And
thanks.
now we'll take audience questions. So, any questions for Ron? Yes.
Oh. Mark. Hey, Mark. How's it going, man?
Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
I wasn't familiar with The Verge till I saw your work,
Oh, okay.
and so had a look at the site and so on. Did you, as you went and compiled all the headlines you wanted to use, are there some that you avoided as time went on, or left out that you maybe when it's done you're like, hey, I could keep going, or there's a particular kind of it's tacky and there's Trump stuff and there's COVID stuff, but were they referring to anything in particular that you're like, no, that won't be part of my work?
Well, I mean, it's a massive website with like, whether it's just COVID or Trump or anything tech related, and a lot of the tech stuff gets quite heavy on that site, but it's also infused with nerd culture too, right? But so I wanted to just sort of do a sampling of the site, not sort of hone in on anything in particular. So, but as far as how the paintings are formatted, yes, I mean, there were times there were some headlines I just couldn't use just because they were too long. So, like, there were just too many characters, so I couldn't get it to fit on the canvas, which is already predetermined, and like the layout of it is already predetermined in advance. Okay. So there were moments like that where it's like, ooh, this was a juicy one, but it just didn't work. So then you just move on because, there's always another headline, right? It's like if you miss the bus, there's another bus. It doesn't matter, right? So.
Anyone has to catch the C bus?
Yeah. Yeah.
I really like that question. I just want to see who asked it.
Oh, yeah, it was Mark. Here, yeah, right. Hey, Michael.
Oh, hey. I had a similar. I'm not to get in on this act up here right now, but I was working on a similar question, and I like that just kind of got on fire with that question. So, the question is, Ron, with this body of work, the 320 plus works now in this show, for example, I want to know, is it through the selection process or the disc selection, as it were, do we have a mob or do we have a chorus?
Try that again. Oh.
Do we have a mob
of
text, or do we have a chorus that is a concentrated harmonic enterprise?
Like in terms of its overall composition?
Yeah. Like to your sense of what it is.
I mean, again, listen, okay, just because I'm a text-based artist, like when I say that, I'm already kind of cringe a little bit to myself, because when I think of text-based work, I go, God, that's really boring. So you within the limitations, you have to try and find a way of sexing it up, so to speak, right? You got to make it sort of visually more engaging. So, you want to, when compiling these tiles of headlines in various sizes and depths, you want there to be some kind of rhythm, but it's not anything specific. It's just more so that you get this nice kind of push-pull play as you doom scroll along the work. I used the word, right? Yeah, so.
Hi, sorry.
I don't know, did that answer the question?
I don't know whether you answered that very well, but.
Oh, no?
I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I want to go back to the memory, because I find that really provocative. and we had one comment early on in the exhibition. Somebody came in and said that they couldn't believe why would we re-traumatize everybody by bringing them back to 2020, which seemed odd. At the same time, it sat with me the whole time. It's like I can't quite understand that comment in a way, but in some way, yeah. I mean, on the face of it, it's like we don't want to relive that, as Dieter points out. But at the same time, why would looking at these headlines, which we're all infinitely familiar with, bring about such a strong emotional reaction? And part of what you were just discussing kind of made me think that it wasn't so much reading them again as it was, why would you do this? Why would you actually redo all of these? In the act of memorializing them or reifying them, making them concrete, you're effectively saying that they're not forgettable. We have been trained to forget things. So there's a certain violence in painting all of this again. So I don't know if that's a question as much as a kind of observation. I'm curious to hear you respond to it.
Well, that's dark, Reed. That's really dark. I wasn't expecting that from him. Don't you think it was dark?
I'm telling you, you're a dark guy. Yes.
I mean,
artist. He's a sinister character, Ron Terada.
I think, like, when you start a project like this, like, again, like, I started it in 2017, so I guess the politics in the work, or certainly the pandemic, it wasn't part of the dialogue, right? So for me, I was more interested in, like, the sort of the startups of AI and all this stuff, and how that would affect the culture at large at some point, right? Or society at large. But then, and I was going to wrap this up at the end of 2019, but 2020 happened, and I just felt compelled, because, like, once you're locked out of your studio, you just were thinking, well, this year's going to be different. So it wasn't so much like, I didn't think too far ahead, put it that way. I just felt compelled that this body of work should also include 2020, no matter where it ends up going. So that sounds a little innocent, but or naive, but do I want a beer? Yeah, sure, man. I want to have a beer.
I have a question back here.
But there's questions. You can't just get and have a beer. Like, oh, right, okay.
Have a beer.
All right, sure, yeah. Yeah, okay.
So I'm curious about the tension between the digital and the analog, because it feels like you're sourcing from a digital source and then translating it into, the rigor of painting. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about, that going to the memorializing end, the idea of, I vote for chorus myself because of the composition here. But have you thought about, like, how it would differ if it was a photograph or even if it was a sound piece with all of these sound? Like, have you taken it into these other forms or thought of that?
It never occurred to me to explore, like an audio aspect of the work or like a photographic aspect. Like, part of why I started TLDR in the first place was like the subject matter is tech-based, right? And I guess our means of communications is like so indebted to tech that I kind of, and the means in terms of how we communicate is through our devices. I wanted to take something the polar opposite, and I wanted to use painting like the oldest medium, basically, to communicating with people. Like, there's this contradiction of something so dumb next to something so, like, advanced. I thought it was compelling, and that's why it never occurred to me that the work needed to go through some other translation in another medium. So, yeah.
I know that there's another question, but you know what? I like what you just said about this being the oldest medium, and I am suddenly kind of transported back to cave painting.
Oh, okay.
And it's a bit that.
You think I'm cave painting?
Well, it's a bit of a cave. No,
My studio is a cave. There's no windows.
No. But really, like, if you've ever been inside one of those caves in Spain or France, Altamira or Lascaux, or that, and they're you don't have to travel all that far, but I mean, those are astounding impressions. And so, cave painting remains in a way unparalleled. But that's an interesting metaphor. But that's. Well, someone had a question.
There's
I just had a remark.
Sure. Yeah. I thought you were just, just flexing your arm or something like that.
Hi.
Hello.
I just wanted to thank you for your work. I think it's really important.
Oh, thank you.
And my question is, for 2 questions ago, do you think because of the way our society is operating at the moment, that you're nervous about future works? Or you feel inhibited because of expectations?
Like me personally as an artist, like to continue making work?
Yep.
No, I don't. I'm not fearful of anything, really. I mean, something darker will come along and it'll just get me excited.
Look at Ron.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Really leaning into it.
I have a question. I want to go back to the cave, back to your studio.
This is for you.
So, I just want to know what it's like. Like, I guess the simple question is, do you enjoy painting? So you have a job, you go down to the studio, you're in the midst of it, you've been doing it for months, you got months to go, it's the same thing every day. There you are, putting on the letters, putting on the paint, getting it right. How do you enjoy that in the days where, or is it tedious or boring, or do you actually enjoy it?
Yeah. We're back to feelings.
But this time, be honest.
Well, look, I've been honest. Like,
Ron,
I want to be honest. Like,
I'll be honest.
What's that?
I'm one of those bad painters that insists on doing bad painting, but I enjoy painting. When I got the paint, I've got my paint box out, I got my paint, I like the paint. Like, I'm happy to paint a wall or a bottom of a boat even. Like, I don't care what, if it's paint, I'm happy.
Well, Hank, I can't help you there, man. I mean, I surely enjoy the activity, but maybe not as much as you. To me, I'm just like part of it. You have to have a workman-like mentality, right?
Right.
You got to punch the clock, so to speak. So that is something that, and also when you set a scale of 325, you want to just see it through. So, but do I get excited to go to student? Yes and no, I guess. Right. That was pretty honest, right? Come on. Yeah.
No, good question. Great question.
Yeah.
Any?
Thank you. Hi, Ron. Well, I think, again, I just want to say that this is, of course, this and other work is courageous work because it needs to go out there. But having said that, I personally, my own practice, I find myself shifting in the last 2 or 3 years because the division in our society hasn't gone away. In fact, divisiveness is growing, probably. And asking myself, as an artist, where do I sit in this? And my responsibility in the work, increasing division, possibly, or not doing anything about it. And coming back, it's going to sound a bit corny, but the potential for art to be healing, to be bridging, to be doing that. So maybe it's a comment, but moving forward, it does preoccupy me. What, am I being, maybe it's too grandiose, helpful to what's going on or not in my work.
Okay. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what you wanted me to comment on.
Comment, yeah, on your own perception, on yeah.
Like in terms of do I think the work aids in some kind of
Well, Well, I mean, the audience that sees your work, the majority, including myself, say, yeah, we agree with it. But the other audience doesn't see it, for one thing. And if they did see it, they would say, oh, yeah, Marxist, whatever. We know it is. And do we have a responsibility to, and this is a general question perhaps as where you stand on that, to kind of move across, to try to do some of the bridging or the healing?
I mean, I like what you're saying, but this idea of responsibility, I mean, that's...
Not your jam.
Well, I totally get it, but it's like, but maybe it's not my jam. But no, I want to try and answer the question. It's not something where I feel like, a viewer needs to walk away with something very specific about what they make of the work, because I think when you're trying to depict something as insane as the year 2020, it's going to differ for everybody, right? So in that work, it's just, it's hard to sort of have a kind of a general sort of thing that you want a viewer to take away. It's like, as I said earlier, like, COVID was fine for me, but I know for others it was like, it was a nightmare. So, so you just have to sort of kind of accept those extremes, right?
Right.
Well, I do think there's something, well, uplifting is not the word, but there's this is not, it's not, one does not leave the space depressed necessarily.
I don't, maybe.
Anyway, I do, yeah. I know that there's more questions, and I don't know what the time here is, like the C-bus and all that. Look at so many hands, Jesus. Ron, I told you, they're coming for you.
No,
but
we got one with a mic ready to go.
Right, yeah, okay, go do it.
Okay, there's a lot of discussion about audiences feeling uncomfortable and being re-traumatized by your work. Do you think that perhaps there's quite a bit of coddling of audiences going on, given, again, this kind of climate that we don't want to offend anyone, we don't want to say the wrong thing?
That sounds like a trap. No. Why is that funny? So I think, I do think we're in a moment where, there is a kind of a hypersensitivity. Let's just leave it at that, And sometimes that's good, and sometimes it's not so good. That's how I look at it. But Dieter, please, did you have something to add?
Is there coddling?
Yeah, I'd call it like oversensitivity, maybe. You're right.
Well, I am interested in what Reed mentioned. Why do we have to be put through this ordeal again? Which, the work, that's a question the work obviously kind of compels. And yes, we must go through it again, just to remember its awfulness. And one of my favorite definitions of art is that, the real reason why art exists is as an indictment of the world as it exists, right? And that's what this work in a way does. It's an indictment of what we accept to be the world that we live in. So there's a much higher, there's a much greater kind of generalized anxiety about what may be regarded as offensive and triggering and all of these things. And but those are interesting. That's an interesting syndrome to go through. But well, before we came here, we chatted a little bit, and again, and it feels like this is in a way the big issue of today's discussion, and it feels it's the issue of the work in a way. How, do we look away, or do we actually confront the horror? And then perhaps I'm a little bit too dramatic now, but it's like Géricault and his paintings of the heads of decapitated victims of the French Revolution. He chose to record and not look away and not, trek into Barbizon to paint like an ancient oak or something. So that's a good lineage, Ron, you and Theodore. So yeah, but so yes, I'm a partisan of confrontation, and I think that's why I write about Ron's work, because it is defiant. And you already mentioned this idea of your predilection for a certain kind of crudeness and frontality, and like black on white, white on black. And so yes, I sympathize with that. That kind of mandate for art as like a source of discomfort. This is a very comfortable chair, but anyway, there's more questions. One more? Okay, and then after in the bar. Ron, they're all yours.
Sure. Sorry.
Three more questions. Just going back to this idea of a history painting, it seems to me that this amazing epic piece is as much about the impossibility of making history paintings, and is perhaps, while using 2020 as like source material, that it is really about the bigger issue of how to document the cacophony of social moments and to make history paintings. So when you use the term blunt, Ron, I don't actually experience this work as being so blunt, although language is often might seem like that. It's there's moments of many different moods and absurdities and strange twists in language, and some parts are even poetic. So it seems like it's about something larger than 2020 per se, and being so bluntly representational of that moment.
Yeah, I mean, when I say blunt or direct, I mean, it's just more of a general approach to making work. But but yeah, I'm glad that there's all these other nuances that are being detected in TLDR, because that's what I want. It's never just one thing. There was multiple things happening at the same time, right? So, yeah, the work is only interesting if there's all these other threads, because 2020 was just such a crazy year. I can't. Like if 2020 didn't happen, I don't think I would have made my more recent work. So,
Well, blunt is a quality, right? So maybe a virtue. You sneak one more in, Stephen. Do it.
I'll sneak one more in. I think I want to say there's more positive things than thinking artists are always up to the right and moral good thing, and that this reminds me of the May 1808 execution, that maybe Goya was just reporting something. We actually don't know his politics exactly. We get to witness this amazing painting, but then is there a pleasure in the mimesis and the reenactment that in fact there's a pleasure in that room of what you've reenacted as the artist, and that's, I can't know your politics. In fact, I could just say, that was an exercise of reporting the news. 150 journalists have just been killed recently in the Middle East. Like, journalism is not exactly a life expectancy goal. So there's something pleasurable in that room that is not just about the moralizing power of text and journalistic promise and all these kinds of rather Boy Scout approaches to looking and thinking about art. Seems to me that representation, text, going back to something like what Auerbach was writing in terms of mimesis, that is still one of the essential, observable, witnessable goals of an artist. And then later, who cares about the reception? It's up to you. So that's what I've always liked about your work, that in fact I see the line through is the observable event of the opening or the art show, the exhibition, and then you record it, just like Onkawara throws the newspaper down in front, and you get to be a witness to the two reenactments. One is the placement, the sculpture. One is the actual painting. So I think that there's something to be missed in the conversation tonight about how much is in the reenactment and what that process of an artist really is.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Stephen, like you should be up here done.
So I think we have to. It's probably kind of. We have to wrap it up here.
Yeah.
I know there's many more things that people want to ask here of Ron Terada, but I thank you for your work.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Beer, barbecue, and freedom?
Sure.